After the end of World War II, Europe, and especially the country of Germany, were in shambles. Germany was in need of laborers to help rebuild the country, and Berlin was one of the cities that took a large amount of damage during the war. So, large volumes of workers were needed to start the rebuilding process. In order to get all of these needed workers, Germany signed several agreements with different countries to ensure the Gastarbeiter program, and in English, the guest worker program, would be successful and advantageous for the German country. Many of the agreements originally stipulated that workers would remain in Germany for only a short set period of time. That was usually just a few months to a year long. However, due to the overwhelming financial cost of moving old workers out of the country and new workers into the country, this rule was rarely ever enforced. This ultimately led to a large influx of immigrants staying in Germany, having children, and integrating into the German culture through sheer circumstance. The most notable community to rise out of this situation was the Turkish migrant workers and their families. Berlin is split into 12 large districts with several sub-districts within each, and all are known for various attributes. The largest populations of Turkish immigrants before the 2000s used to live in the western districts, while the eastern districts had a vastly smaller immigrant population, which reflected the former division of Berlin. According to a study written in 1998, the most highly populated immigrant districts by percent are 33.1% in Kreuzberg, 28.3% in Wedding, and 26.9% in Tiergarten. Though these statistics are old, they are still useful in determining where Turkish immigrants have chosen to stay and take root. According to newer statistics, most Turkish immigrants now continue to live in the heart of Berlin, and specifically within the large districts of Mitte, Pankow, Reinickendorf, Neukölln, and Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg. In Mitte, the largest numbers of Turks live within the sub-districts of Wedding, Moabit, and Tiergarten. In Pankow, it is Weißensee, Prenzlauer Berg, and Pankow. In Neukölln, it is Neukölln. And in Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg, it is Kreuzberg. Now more than ever, Turkish immigrants and their families are expanding into the eastern quarters of Berlin looking for cheaper living conditions. According to an article in the Scottish Geographical Journal, the geographical distribution of businesses in the food product sector, in particular, reflects the distribution of Turkish residents by city district. Over half of all the Turkish restaurants, snack bars, and grocers were concentrated in the districts of Kreuzberg, Neukölln, and Wedding in 1990. This is still true today, though businesses have now expanded to other areas in the city and have since become more widely accepted in the German culture. According to The Local, a German newspaper written in English, the doner kebab was invented by a guest worker named Kadir Nerman in 1972. Since this time, the doner has slowly but surely exploded in popularity, especially within the past 10 years. There are approximately 16,000 doner shops in all of Germany, and Berlin is considered the doner capital, with over 1,000 shops in the city alone. According to ATDID, which is a union for Turkish doner retailers in Europe, the doner kebabs generate an annual turnover rate of 3.5 billion euros for producers and shop owners in Germany. The doner kebab has also become a significant indicator of Turkish presence in German society. Turks and Germans alike enjoy eating this food, which cements a shared cultural experience. However, the Turkishness of the doner kebab is under dispute. The doner has undergone many changes since its inception in the 1970s. According to the father of doner, in Turkey it was traditional for the rich and royal to eat grilled meat skewers with rice and salad served on a plate. However, Nerman felt that the workers of Berlin needed a portable meal. The doner started off simply enough. The only ingredients were sliced lamb or beef packed into a Turkish flatbread with onions. But as time passed, he came to add salad, tomatoes, and a choice of sauces and spice. However, the modern doner has undergone many more changes. It is now commonplace to use turkey or chicken in place of the lamb and beef, and the amount of toppings that can now be added are endless. Nerman states, "In my opinion, there are now too many ingredients in doner kebabs. If the meat is good, you don't need any tomato or spices." And in respects to the use of chicken, he is quoted as saying, "That isn't a real doner." This type of food hijacking is referred to as the McDonaldization of society. Much like modern American Chinese food has been modified to the American palate, the doner is not truly Turkish in nature. According to Tarkan Tazmaruk, the chairman of ATDID, the doner is a German invention. The doner was originally created for the German workforce and continues to reflect the German palates of today. The extent of toppings and changing of customary meats that are used in a doner display the cultural food pattern of Germans. The doner has now become and created a distorted image of Turkish food culture. The first Turks began arriving in Germany around the 1950s. In 1956, there were only about 100 Turks living in Berlin and absolutely no way for them to access foods from their homeland. The only opportunities they had to get any foods associated with dishes from Turkey were at German grocers, which were often astronomically priced and impossible for Turks without extra money to purchase. This lack of cultural fulfillment through food forced the Turkish population to move closer together out of cultural necessity. At that time, the Turkish community was, and still is, friendly, and often invited each other over to share Turkish meals together. However, just 15 years later, Turkish foods began to take a foothold in the German food landscape of Berlin. By the early 1970s, there were over 40,000 Turks living in Berlin. Döner shops and Turkish grocers began popping up in the Turkish neighborhoods of Berlin, providing modestly priced food items for the Turkish and German population to enjoy. This modest foothold has now exploded since the 1970s. By the early 2000s, it is reported that 720 million kebabs are consumed each year, and there is about one döner stand for every 8 citizens in the country of Germany. It is also estimated that in the entirety of Germany, approximately 200 tons of döner are consumed each day, while 25 tons of it are consumed in Berlin alone. This enormous turnover means that approximately 3.6 billion euros are earned every year from döners alone, which surpasses all other fast food companies like McDonald's and Burger King. From such a meager beginning, Turkish food has exploded and become a part of the German cultural landscape. The Turkish community has certainly become most famous for its invention of the doner, though that is not all they have done. The doner has become the face of the Turkish population, and this is troubling because it often masks serious cultural, social, and economic issues that plague their community. There are approximately 2.1 million Turks now living in Germany, and approximately 41.5 thousand are self-employed in Turkish enterprises. According to this chart from 1996, there are 1,129 Turkish enterprises in Berlin, and this number most certainly has risen since then. The question of whether food is affordable and accessible for Turks is mostly answered as a resounding yes. However, that does not mean that the Turkish troubles have suddenly vanished. The Turkish population in Berlin and the entirety of Germany must battle for its right as citizens, even if they have been living there their entire life. Advertising and social policies are rarely ever created or targeted to the Turkish population, which is astonishing considering they make up such a large and integral part of German society. Turks now, more than ever before, are purchasing brand name products and often are no longer shopping at discount stores such as Aldi. However, the image of the poor, struggling Turk wearing traditional clothing continues to persist aggressively even now. This constant battle for rights and government help for the Turkish population in Germany is disheartening. Many Germans have seen the doner as the official integrator of Turks into German society. However, this is a damaging misconception. The integration of Turks into German society is a very difficult issue that must be addressed by the German population just as much as it has been by the Turks. Turkish integration will never happen without the help and recognition of the German people. Turkish immigrants and their families face a variety of difficult social and cultural injustices in Germany, and language barriers as well as cultural barriers do not improve this situation. Integrating into German culture is very difficult for Turks, especially when they can feel that they are not wanted or accepted as true Germans, even if they have lived in that society their entire lives. Turks often live in areas of Berlin that have been deemed particularly Turkish because that is where they can find an area of cultural acceptance and friendship. There are many social, political, and economic changes that need to be made in order to help the integrating Turkish families in Berlin and throughout Germany, but an important thing to remember is that Turkish immigrants cannot just be marked and relegated by the Döner. The Döner is an invention made by a Turkish man for the German people. Before Turkish food culture became popular in Germany, it was a food that Turkish immigrants could turn to in order to remember home. However, it can now only vaguely represent food commonly eaten in Turkey. If this is true, then what does the doner have to do with Turkish culture? The answer is nothing, but also everything. The doner has become very German in nature as time has passed and its popularity has increased. As of now, the doner cannot represent Turkish culture on its own, but it has served as a platform for Germans and Turks to come together on. The doner has assisted in the start of cultural and political discussions about the status of Turkish immigrants. However, it cannot conclude these discussions and fix the problems on its own. Further discussion and action need to be taken in order to change the situation of Turkish-German families for the better. The doner is just an initial platform to initiate cultural understanding and conversation, not the end-all be-all of the Turkish integration issue in Germany.